The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky here, and today I'm here with Christian Stadler. Christian, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. You are literally more than halfway across the world in Africa right now. We'll talk more about that because you teach at Warwick University, which is in the UK, but here you are in Africa. So that's just very fascinating for me. So I want to explore that. But before we do that, let me just give a quick kind of intro here. As I mentioned, you're a professor of strategic management at Warwick Business School. Your expertise has been featured in places like Harvard Business Review, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, BBC, a whole bunch of others. And your real focus is about and you think about how to enable companies to grow, adapt, and really beat their competitors with a superior strategy. I want to dive and really get into strategy and how consultants can apply more kind of strategic thinking to their businesses, because so often people are just focused on tactical kind of day to day and don't really sit back and think intentionally about strategy. So I see this as a very powerful kind of opportunity, as an advantage. So I want to get into that. But before we do that, take us back. Let's set the stage for how did you get to where you are today? You mentioned that when you and I were speaking that you did work in a consulting firm before kind of getting into the world of academia. So just kind of take us back to your early days from high school into the next kind of stages of your career.
So grew up in a small little village. Yeah, the town is called Niederndorf. 2,000 people, halfway between Munich and Innsbruck. Picturesque, Sound of Music. If you've seen it, you know where I'm from. That's exactly what it looks like. That's where I grew up. When I was 14, I went to a military high school, which is close to Vienna. Did my national service a bit longer afterwards, a one-year one, and became an officer in the Austrian army. Then degree in Innsbruck, spent some time abroad. When I did my PhD, I was sitting with Shell for, a few years, 3 years or so. Time flies, you can't remember sometimes when you think back, and It's been 25 years ago. And was it 1 year? Was it 2 years? But in any case, I spent some time headquarters in Shell. And what's maybe interesting as well, my degree was in history and my PhD was in business history. And I sort of, swerved into the world of business step by step. Then I had a short stint in consulting, very short actually, in Roland Berger in Germany. Are they active in the US as well, Roland Berger? I think so, yeah.
I've known the name Roland Berger for many, many years. I don't know what their presence is in North America, but certainly a very well-known European consulting firm.
So I was with them for a short while. I did notice that this was not my world, It kind of felt like every day you're on a job interview, I remember. You have to prove yourself in front of the partners every day. I'm more natural in the academic world, I think, where I have longer time to think, where I can develop whatever idea I want to. And I have an idea today, I want to pursue it. And I might work with a company on that, but I have every freedom I want. I can do that for 5 years and, dive into this. That kind of, is certainly something that I enjoy a lot. The book, which we might speak about a little bit later on open strategy, was done together with a consulting firm, a German one. They called IMP, Innovative Management. So in that way, there's certainly a connection there. I've also, over the years, I interact a fair bit with Martin Reeves, who heads the BCG Henderson Institute. And I interact a fair bit with Chris Suk, who used to run the strategy practice for Bain for many years. So, clearly connections there, but I'm not cut out to be a consultant myself.
As you and I were speaking before, this is a bit of a different type of interview than we would usually do, because we really do focus on active consultants or consulting firm owners that work with organizations. But the reason why I wanted to have you on the show is to get your perspective around strategy. And it's an area that you've done a lot of work in, and I can see this directly benefiting consultants. But before we do that, I don't want to gloss over, you mentioned that you went to a military high school, which when I hear that, I'm wondering, was Christian a bad kid? Did you need a lot of, tell me, was that by choice? Were you forced? What's the backstory of going to a military high school?
So my dad was a high school principal. So he went to all these fairs where they gave them information about various schools and stuff. And one of them was this military high school, which I visited together with my dad. And I thought, as a 14-year-old, this pure adventure. You're out there well, you're not quite hunting the bad guys, yeah, but you're sort of watching too many movies, I guess, yeah. You start to feel this is going to be super cool. And it was very enjoyable. I think it was a bit different. It was not quite as militaristic as one would have expected, but good friends. I did enjoy the whole boarding school experience a lot. But no, I'm not a bad kid. Yeah. On the contrary, a very good one, I think. Yeah.
Nice. I want to dive right into strategy. It's a word that these days people throw around. Oftentimes they talk about strategy and when they really mean tactics. So I'd love to hear your definition of, when you think about it, kind of the context of business, entrepreneurship, how do you find kind of strategy and as well strategic management?
I've recently had a conversation with Ashok Vaswani. He's one of the board members of Barclays. And I talked to him about the time when he was in charge of Barclays in the UK. And he had a very simple way of defining it, which I liked a lot. Yeah. So he was saying strategy really tries to answer three very simple questions. Where are we at the moment? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? It's simple, but I think it summarizes really well. So, let me go with this one.
So let's put that in the context then for the independent solo consultant or even the kind of boutique small consulting firm owner. How have you seen, or how do you believe strategy, should best be kind of applied or thought of? How can people use this concept of strategy in a small business?
You might have seen that I've actually written an article in Forbes on this. And for the small consulting firms, if they're trying to do what McKinsey, Bain, or BCG does, then they're lost before they started. Yeah, they have a massive machine with super smart people, huge marketing. You can't beat them on their own game. So you need to try and do something different. I think that's the only way how you can prevail as a small consulting firm. And you could do that in different ways. Yeah, you could do that if you're really super specialized in a particular industry. Well, some consulting firms do that. Yeah, where they all about the pharmaceutical industry, for example. So that's one way. Another one is that you are completely focused on a particular topic. We find more and more of those who are somewhere in the tech space, AI driven, and you get critical mass in this particular area, which again, then you can compete. You have some of those, which in some countries then are in that particular area of expertise larger than actually BCG or McKinsey. So that's one way, yeah. The other one would be that you have a very particular idea and you are able to push around this idea. Yeah, we've seen that it's typically associated to some well-known personalities. So Clayton Christensen's idea about disruptive innovation, that saw a consulting firm emerge from that space. That's another option. One other thing which might work is if you have particular strong relationships. The business model from the large consulting companies, the big guy selling the product, but then you have young people often fresh out of their MBA doing the work. And there's some companies who don't like that. Yeah, they would like to have people with long-term experience working throughout and closely with them. And that's, what some small consulting firms do as well. Often, people who left the company but still stay close to that company or know others in this industry, they do that type of work. So, basically specialization, I guess, is my answer. You can't do everything, but you're good in one particular area.
Right. And so what I heard, I was just making some notes as you were speaking, you broke down that ways to kind of think about kind of charting your strategy or a direction, at least. One would be based on industry. Another would be around a type of specialization. So for example, maybe you're an expert in machine learning, but it's not just for one industry. It could be across multiple industries, or maybe you're working just with one industry like pharmaceutical. So that was the second. And the third was then having a big idea that can really stand out, building around that idea. And then the fourth is relationships. And that's an area where I think so many consultants don't focus in enough on. They don't pay attention to, they try and compensate for their weaknesses instead of focusing on their strengths. As you mentioned, big firms, they often will have junior people going in and doing the work. If you're a boutique, if you're a small consulting firm and you're doing the exact opposite, you or a core team are doing a lot of the work, you want to shout that from the rooftops. You want to make sure that people are very aware that that is the case, because that is a kind of a point of differentiation. You talked about the person from Barclays and their definition of strategy. You've kind of listed 4 different ways to think about strategy. When you can kind of compare and contrast strategy to tactics, what would you say about that? Very often we'll hear people say we have 3 strategies. And one of our strategies is building our online presence through social media. Is that a strategy? How do you think about that, the separation and the distinction between strategy and tactic?
It's kind of fluid, I would say. The tactics is maybe a bit more on the implementation side. So you have an overall strategy, but you have several tactics to make that happen. the strategy is likely to stay alive a little longer, while the tactics adjust more often according to what the situation is on the ground. But it's not so black and white, yeah? I don't mind so much about the semantics either, yeah? If you call it strategy, somebody else calls it tactics, so what, yeah? You have a goal, you want to reach it, you figure out how to get there. And whatever you call it, that's sort of the big picture you're trying to drive at.
In all of the studies that you've done and all the conversations you've had with different consulting firms, with different businesses, when you look at where you see the most success when it comes to strategy, is there any limitation on how many strategies a firm or a company has that they're working towards at one time? Like, is it possible to have 3 or 4 strategies within a company that are all happening concurrently? Or is it one strategy, you push that forward, you get it across the line, and then you look at the next?
If you had asked me 5 years ago, my definite answer would have been no more than 3. Chris Zook used to say that always. If a company tries to do more than 3 things, they kind of get lost in detail. But more recently, as I've looked at this idea that strategy should be a more open process, the idea that in the end, a strategy consists of hundreds, sometimes thousands of kind of mini strategies or mini actions on all different levels of an organization, it resonates with me. Yeah, you might have this big idea, which is fantastic on paper, but without sort of, these hundreds of people out there in a large organization doing things that kind of goes in sync with that, it doesn't work, yeah? And maybe sometimes it's also okay if things are even diverge a little bit, yeah? Because of these various divergences, one thing emerges, which is really particularly fruitful, and another one then is just left by the wayside. So I guess a long-winded way of saying I'm not entirely sure. Right. I used to be in the camp of don't do more than 3 things, but I'm moving a bit. Yeah, you might be able to do more things. It's just that this happens in very different parts of the organization.
Right. So would it be fair to say that for a smaller firm, you would still want to be much more focused, and rather than try and adding a lot more things, you might even subtract some things you have right now so that you can focus in on a couple of things or one thing that would really make the difference? Whereas a larger organization, you have greater capacity, more people, more resources. Therefore, you might be able to handle effectively more kind of strategic initiatives. Would that be accurate, or what are your thoughts on that?
Sometimes people in business, when they say resource, they mean just financial resources. In business strategy, the academic world, is a massive literature. It's one of the things we occupy ourselves since 1991, I guess. There was a big article, and there's some precursors. They go all the way to the 50s in this field. Yeah, so there's thousands of articles in this space. And one thing that kind of becomes clear out of this work is, you can only do things where you have the appropriate resources. I'll give you a nice little example as well. It's a few years old, where my brother-in-law just finished uni here in Nairobi. And he has visited us in England, had some guacamole, the avocado spread. Liked it a lot, and it was not so common over here. So he thought, because everyone actually has an avocado tree in their backyard, why not start an avocado business? Yeah, sounds great. So I start to be a bit of the devil's advocate here, and I ask him, so, do you have any experience in producing, manufacturing something, which, he didn't have. It was fresh out of uni. Do you, have any R&D experience where you know how to turn such a product on, which works on an industrial scale into something that people can eat and it stays well after a few days, which you didn't have? Do you have any connections to a supermarket chain who would actually put this on your shelves, which you didn't have? Yeah. I asked him, do you have any capital to make this happen? I think he thought I would be the capital, but having talked about the other things, plus, professors not quite as capital rich usually, we came to the conclusion that the idea might be great, but he doesn't have the resources that it takes to pull this off. So hence, you're absolutely right. The resources are limitation. Larger companies have more resources, can probably do more things. Smaller, most likely have less and will concentrate more.
I was hoping that you're going to say that against all odds, and your kind of maybe, suggestions that he might not make this successful. I was hoping that the story was going to be that he said, forget you, Christian, I'm going to go off and I'm just going to do this myself. And he turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. I was hoping for that entrepreneur kind of story, but maybe it'll happen later. So
I would love it as well. We wouldn't have to talk anymore. I would just lie on the beach if he would be rich.
There you go. Let's shift now into your new book, which is called Open Strategy, Mastering Disruption from Outside the C-Suite. Let's just define, to begin with, what is open strategy? How is open strategy different from the typical definition of strategy?
Usually, in most companies, you have a small core group who develops strategy. CEO, the board members, maybe a strategy team that he has, maybe an outside consulting firm. But it's a pretty closed affair where this whole strategy is developed. And once it is developed, then you start to spread the news. There's some downsides. One downside is if the same people work together year in, year out, they're most likely to have the same ideas. And, they know each other thinking. The chances that you come up with something entirely fresh, they reduce. The second, I would say even bigger problem is the implementation side. Most strategies, somewhere between 50 and 90%, depending on which study you look at, fail because the implementation doesn't work out. And it doesn't work out because people either don't like what they hear and they think I can sit it out, or they don't really understand what it means for them. If they're involved in the whole development of the strategy process, which is the core idea of open strategy, you open up, you bring people into the conversation who are usually not there, employees who work on the front line in the shop floor, maybe some outsiders from other industries, maybe you bring even a competitor into the conversation. And that way, you get fresh ideas. And on the implementation side, people can figure out what exactly that means for them. I could tell the story of how he pulled this off in Barclays, if you're interested.
Please, yeah, that'd be great.
In 2012, he took over the retail business in the UK. And in 2012, it started to become probably sort of known that the world is moving towards online, maybe even towards mobile. And he could have just done something himself. But then he was very much aware that he has this massive legacy business, 325-year-old business. We have, I think, 30,000 people working in retail in Barclays in the UK. And you kind of need to figure a way that they also know what to do. Which brings me back a bit to this, strategy really lives out of 1,000 small decisions rather than one or two big ones. And he set up a two-stage process. First stage was working groups, where he had one set of working groups with young people fresh out of uni, less tainted by the dominant thinking in Barclays. Another one where various functions were represented, a bit more senior people. And they kind of brought some basic thinking, broad trajectories up, but they didn't iron out the details. Then second stage, he set up, with the help of IBM, they have this jam software, and he set a strategy jam up, which is a little bit like a big online conference. You have moderators, you have technology afterwards to also try to find out where are big discussion streams going on, what are major topics, etc. Mm-hmm. And in this jam, actually, they did one more thing. They also had town hall meetings where I think they rented out 70 cinemas or something like this in the UK, and they had big meetings. And both in these meetings and in the jams, people had an opportunity to think through, what does it mean for me? Yeah. How can I adjust myself? So conversations like, hey, Domino's Pizza, which is one of the big pizza delivery chains in the UK, they can tell you when you order the pizza, when you put it in the oven, when it's coming out, when it's coming to you. In mortgage, we don't know anything what's happening. We can't tell our customers anything in between. Yeah, we can tell them we got the application. In the end, we tell them you get it for this condition or you don't get it. But, everything else is a black box. So, people started to think through what it really means for them. And I've talked to several executives, including Mr. Vaswani. They said, there was an energy around strategy and a sort of depths of discussions which they've never had before. The results were really great. They, shortly after that, launched their mobile app, which quickly got 1 million users. Today, with around 9 million users, is one of the most successful fintech products in the UK. They really turned around a legacy bank in a way that people understood what it means. Yeah, they kind of, they're digital literate now. Maybe one more funny story in that context to share. They told me that there was once an older gentleman coming to one of the Barclays branches with his new iPad. And he asked them to help them set up the iPad because his grandson has told him, if you have digital problems, you can go to Barclays. So people understand these guys know digital. I don't think it would have been possible without this open process where literally everyone was involved.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching Program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
let's pull this back. I want to rein it in for the smaller, either the independent consultant or the consulting firm owner that maybe has 5 or 10 or 20 employees or team members. How do you feel that they could implement or get the benefits of open strategy, even when they are significantly smaller than Barclays?
So first of all, this is a business opportunity for them. I've worked with this German consulting firm I mentioned before, who developed a set of different tools that you can help your clients with. And maybe I share one of them, is a really cool one. They call it the Nightmare Competitor exercise. And the core idea is that over 3 days, you come together with your clients. You set up teams where in each team, half of the members are from the clients and half of them are outside people that you bring. So people from different industries, very different perspectives. And then each of those teams develops what they call a nightmare competitor. So a firm that doesn't really exist in reality, but one that would really destroy the business of this client. Then they can use that as a reflection point, once they're done. They kind of do that in a Dragon Den style atmosphere. Do you have Dragon Den in the US? Yeah. So they do that, they have these competing teams, they have votes, and, some teams get voted out because the idea is not good enough. And in the end, you have full-fledged business models for a few of those nightmare competitors. And the client can then, try and see how solid what they are doing is if they would be attacked this way. Or some clients say, hey, let's continue working on this. I actually want to turn this nightmare competitor into real business. IMP has found that about 25% of the clients do that. With things like this, it's a great opportunity for consulting firms where they can help clients to open up their strategy process.
And you said Dragon's Den. So there's Dragon's Den in Canada. In the US, it's called Shark Tank.
Shark Tank. Oh, right. Okay.
Exact same concept. So fun fact. So one of the Shark Tank participants, who's now known as Mr. Wonderful, his name is Kevin O'Leary. He used to be on the Canadian Dragon's Den. And in a previous business that my cousin and I co-founded, I actually interviewed him way, way back in the day. This concept, this example you just shared, I think is extremely powerful, right? To actually take a step back, create like that nightmare competitor, and then look at, well, how can I maybe bring some of those things into what we're doing? Or like just thinking creatively to me is so powerful. And for so many of us, we're just heads down day to day working on client deliverables or marketing or just different things that we don't actually take a step back and look at these bigger opportunities that usually you don't actually see. They're not visible to you and you can't act on them because you're just so busy in the day-to-day. Could you offer one other example? Because I absolutely love that tool. Is there one other one that you feel is really powerful that would help you to think strategically?
Another one that IMP developed is called a trend radar. And the core idea is about, finding big trends. Now, you might say, there's 1,000,001 tools for this already, but there's a couple of differences. The core idea in this tool is not so much that maybe you come up with something that no one could find at all, but that you find a way to involve enough people that there's consensus around this, which is often the difficulty. You have various people in the company, everyone has their favorite trend, but find a way to develop consensus. The second one is it's done, again, with the help of outsiders. Let me talk a bit about how they structure this whole thing as well. They bring in outside experts together, again, with people from inside the company. And the first thing they do is they try to list as many hypotheses as they can possibly can about the outside world. So come up with a long list of things that might happen and be as crazy as you can potentially. I've done that recently here with a small media production company in Nairobi. And they thought of all sorts of things from the political world all the way down to climate change, how that could affect their business. And once you got this long list, you then basically put this in a little survey tool and have everyone assess on how likely they think it is to happen, how much of an impact it would have on their company, and how prepared they are for that. You put all of this into a radar, that's why it's called trend radar, where you have probabilities of how likely it is. The more likely, the more in the center it is. You have bigger bubbles if you are having more of an impact, and smaller if it's less of an impact. And you can color code to make sure that the preparedness is there. Yeah, green, you're prepared. Red, you're dead. Yeah, if this happens. That way you have this sort of nice picture of trends, but it was a social exercise. And because it was a social exercise, people can buy into this and they feel that this makes sense for them. Now you can repeat that regularly as well. And that way you also see how things might change. Yeah. So one of the clients, they've done that. They produce printing machines. They've kind of seen how there's more and more of a trend of they were producing big sort of super tech special machines. And there was more and more of a growing demand. They felt in a space for something a bit less sophisticated, but cheaper. And then started to work on this as they kind of collectively realized that. Now, again, you could say we might have spotted this elsewhere, but by doing it together, that's really helpful. Yeah? And again, the consultant can set up the process, run this in the workshop. We have opportunities to talk about this as well.
Would you consider a consultant who might be running a small firm, if they were to have conversations, so rather than them deciding the strategy by themselves and then kind of having contractors or freelancers or employees implement it, if the founder was to take the concept that they have conversations with their contractors, with their freelancers, even with some of their best clients, and maybe other people in the industry, is that also a form of open strategy?
Yeah, so there's massive flexibility in there. Yeah, I guess whenever we write the book, we try to make it applicable to many places. Yeah. But joking aside, opening up is in that sense fluctuant. Yeah, as soon as you go beyond the C-suite, as the title suggests, you have some form of openness, but then you can go to various forms of extremes where you could even include competitors. There's also, that's important to say, you have to carefully decide whom you want to involve based on how much information you disclose. If this is sort of a closed workshop where you get outsiders as well, but they all sign non-disclosure agreements, then, you can talk openly. But you sometimes might want to engage a really large crowd, but you don't want to tell them exactly what's going on. So again, that's possible as well. Yeah, you can ask questions, put it even in a different setting where it sounds like, people are answering which color of paint you want, but really you have asked a very different question, just dressed it up in a way that it looks different, and you can use that in this way.
I'm thinking about our team as an example. So it would be straightforward for myself and for Sam as co-founders of Consulting Success to go, okay, like here's the path that we're going to take, and then talk to the team and everyone that touches our organization and work together to implement it. However, what we've really been trying to do more and more is to actively include all key team members and even clients or different coaches that work with us in different directions that we're going. Ultimately, the decision needs to usually come from one person, but the influences, right, of seeing different things, different perspectives is extremely valuable. And so for those of you who are listening right now and joining us, maybe it's just you, or maybe you run a small team, that's okay. There's still people around you, whether it's contractors, freelancers, past clients, current clients, people that that are in the industry, other consultants. You can get a lot of interesting inputs from different places. Doesn't mean that you need to agree with those inputs, but at least listen to them, be open to them. I think that can help you to form a much better strategy. And the second thing that you touched on much earlier, Christian, is just the power of having people in alignment, right, with that strategy. So they don't feel like, oh, it's, this person like making the decision and we're not even involved in it. The feeling of, oh yeah, I played a role in that, or at least I was heard as part of this process, I think is extremely valuable.
It's not a democracy, yeah? And you need to be explicit, because otherwise you raise expectations. And then if people feel disappointed, you get just the opposite effect of mobilization. But if you're explicit about this, yeah, I'm listening, I'm trying to get more input, but that doesn't mean that we do whatever you say, then that's good. There's also examples of companies who were not explicit enough or weren't clear enough where the decision rights. A company in Germany, Premier Cola, is a nice one in this respect. Yeah, it got completely unruly because people thought they can just sort of, have an opinion on everything. And it was not clear that what exactly can be talked about exclusively, which one person will take final decisions. And the whole initiative fizzled out. It never succeeded. It started off because there was a popular type of cola, Afri-Cola, that stopped, and they got the recipe and then tried to revive that. But with this sort of democratic approach, that didn't work either. I mean, in the end, it's still a few executives who run the show, but as you point out, they consult more widely, they get more opinions, they find smart ways to engage the crowd.
I want to go over a few more things here before we wrap up. And one I mentioned at the beginning, which I just find to be extremely fascinating because I have a real love for travel and different cultures and places around the world and all that kind of stuff. So here you are, you're originally from a small, little picturesque town in Austria, in the UK, at the business school there. And today we're talking, you're in Nairobi. What took you to Nairobi, and what does it feel like to be in a completely different culture and part of the world, still operating to a degree? I know you spent all of last year, especially due to COVID, still doing the same kind of thing as you'd be doing as if you were in the UK. What's that like being right now in Nairobi?
So first of all, I had a few other stops. I lived a few years in Holland. I lived a couple of years in the States as well. Not the only ones. What took me to Kenya? Well, I met a girl from a small village in Kenya. So, and that's how we ended up here for a little while, because we want our children to experience where mom is from as well. And, actually even better, we met during a internship in the United Nations in New York. So in our case, the UN United Nations. Yes. They were true to their mission.
So my cousin Sam and I, we often joke about this because we say that our friends when we were growing up, and even more so these days, our client base, it's kind of like the United Nations. When we look at where our clients come from, it's all around the world. It's different cultures, different religions, different backgrounds. That's really actually one of our values in our company. When people go to our story page on Consulting Success, you'll see that one of our values, we say like we are worldwide. It's the whole idea. It's that we love that diversity in the world. So I really enjoy hearing that story. Anything that's been challenging for you though to operate in the same way that you would when you were in the UK, being in
I was in Zanzibar for a little while before as well. I remember we sometimes had power outages. So I had a day, I just had shown the students who were back in cold England, but everyone was online, just shown them my porch and the lookout on the Indian Ocean. And then there was a power outage. That was really not ideal. And the students were not too pleased on this particular morning. I was, hectically trying to run to a hotel, find a connection. Eventually, it got solved. I spent a bit long in the evening. I think, we ironed the whole issue out. Some of these infrastructure challenges, that could be a problem. The other one I felt once, which I was a bit annoyed, was this perception issue. So I do a lot of stuff on TV as well. I can't remember what it was about exactly. I think about the car industry, because I commented often about the car industry. And there was an interview to be set up for BBC. And then when they found out that there was in Zanzibar, they said, no, then we can't do it. And my impression was that here was the feeling that the viewers would think that my expertise get lost because I somehow sat in Africa. I've done a CNN interview in Niederdorf once, I remember. I put Niederdorf on CNN, my village, which, that was no problem then, but this is still in Europe. So sometimes the perception that smart and expert ideas need to come from the Western world was driven home at this point in time for me. And, thinking of the people I met, the people I've interacted in, yet there's just no difference. You've got smart and stupid people any place in the world, and that's no different here than it is in New York, in San Francisco, in Vienna, anywhere. Yeah. Right. So that's kind of a couple of things that I found a bit challenging, and of course, mode of operating, etc., can be a bit different. Traffic is horrendous, usually in these big cities like Nairobi. But my work is mainly in front of the computer, so it doesn't affect me too much.
What's your thoughts on the gig economy, or the ability for people, let's say in Europe or in North America, to tap into expertise in Africa specifically, since you have a connection to the continent? Most people in North America, I think maybe less so in Europe, but you think about going to India or going to the Philippines to find virtual assistants or people just to help you at low cost. Are there opportunities? Is there enough expertise? I'm very, very wide casting a net. Africa, of course, there's a lot of diversity within that. But what's the state from what you're seeing right now? Do you believe there are opportunities, or is it not there yet?
Particularly in Kenya, I would say. So Kenya can pride itself to the first functioning mobile payment system, M-Pesa, it's called. I don't know how long it's been around, but certainly for 10 years or so. And, it quickly had a quarter of the country's GDP running through the system. Everyone has an M-Pesa account. So in that, they've been miles ahead. And on the back of that, there's lots of fintech startups. Actually, I started a research project looking at fintech companies, a bit early stages, so I have no findings yet, but there's clearly a big and vibrant community. And you actually have quite a lot of people from the US and Europe coming over here as well. Partly, because this is sort of, a fresh opportunity, lots of growth. Partly, there's a slightly annoying aspect to it as well. The investment money comes from the West if you're looking for big dollars here as well. You then have people who worked in Europe who speak that language, but often have ideas that actually don't really work here. Nonetheless, they get the big dollars to the startup world, while others, which are sometimes really cool ideas, struggle a bit. So one really nice one I've come across is a company called Django. And I might even get involved a bit in this one. Yeah, I like it a lot. I know the owner. They had this idea where they do something on the back of what is a sort of very established tradition. If here in Kenya, you need funding for anything, you typically don't go to the bank because A, you don't get it. And B, the interest rates are, if you're lucky, sort of 15, 16% a year, but more likely 20 and higher. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you come together with family and friends. So let's say you plan a wedding, you get family and friends together to help you. Or, I don't know, you want to do an investment project, you want to build some apartments, you come together with a group of friends and you put money together. One of the things that is difficult in that context, particularly when it's larger group, how do you keep track who is given what, when they have given, etc. Yeah, often you have a bookkeeper, but then it's tedious. You have this thing, people come to the meeting, but the bookkeeper is not there that day to say, oh, you have paid already, but they haven't paid. So it takes a bit longer. So he developed a software system, because he comes from that software background, where all of this is done through an app. It's growing fast, a trend that is big, that is massive, and just makes it easier for everyone to keep track of this. Yeah, and it's linked to this M-Pesa, so people can easily make the payments online. So you have really, really cool stuff happening. I'm just in the beginning of finding these things, but I love it.
Christian, before we wrap up, is there one book that you've read or listened to in the last 6 months? Could be business, could be, fiction, that you would recommend?
A couple. Yeah. One that I liked a lot that I've read recently is from Martin Reeves with, I think, Martin Fuller, The Imagination Machine. And it's a surprising one coming from somebody who is, a partner in a big consulting firm. It finds all these sort of, partly playful ways to kind of get your imagination going. Yeah. In the whole strategy domain, sort of, thinking of really different ways, new ideas. And I think that becomes more and more important as we go into an unpredictable future, which brings me to the second book. Yeah. The second book is Margaret Heffernan's book, Uncharted. That's a book which on the basis says, we addicted to predictions, but it's somewhat stupid because we can't predict the future. So instead, create ways to be more flexible, to deal with a world that we can't know what will happen tomorrow. Learn sometimes, from the world of art. She has a lovely story of how Gaudi built I think it's called Sagrada Familia, the big cathedral in Barcelona, which just happened on the way. That's often how things happen in business, which are successful as well. So these books, I'd recommend after you read mine. Yeah. So, of course, open strategy comes first.
There we go. We'll have all that stuff linked up in the show notes. But for those that do want to learn more about your work, Christian, your books, everything that you're up to, where's the best kind of one place for them to go?
www.openstrategy.info. That's sort of, on the book. If you want me as a person, christianstadler.org.
Okay. We'll have all that linked up in the show notes. Christian, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.